Okay, so okay, so basically it's all about generalizing what is a transaction. So we have this thing called standard transactions. So these are these transactions that we have seen so far, and the transaction was always like this: user P1 sends some money to user P2 from some transaction. It's like this money is 1 Bitcoin or something like this, and then the signature of this user, right? And the whole idea is to generalize this thing. So in particular, standard transactions are a simple case of general transactions. Strange transactions look like this. So before we had these two users, P2, P3. Now we have the same thing, but now transaction looks like this. Okay, so we need these fields here, like one like transaction that is spent, like this is T1, right? Value, okay? But so this is basically like it was. Information about which transaction is spent and what is the value, okay? But then we have this thing called condition to spend the transaction T2, okay? And this is like a technical thing, so you should concentrate for a moment. So basic thing is here I'm specifying how T2 can be spent, okay? So forget for a moment about this witness here, okay? What is important is the witness here. So basically what will happen is that in order to spend this transaction T2, like earlier, this transaction T2 was saying, okay, it is, in order to spend T2, I need a signature of P2, right? Here it is generalized to any Boolean condition, okay? So, I mean, let us look again at this. So the redeeming condition is like this. So this is the situation from the previous slide. So if I want to spend T2, I have to prepare transaction T3, okay, such that if I take this condition, this is a Boolean condition. It's a condition that evaluates to true or false. Then T3 can redeem T2 if this condition that is specified here evaluates to true on this whole thing. Okay? So this is a condition to spend T2. Okay? The condition of the, so this thing is saying I, meaning transaction T2, can be spent by any transaction that will evaluate to true, that will make this function C2 evaluate to true. Okay? And this transaction T3 that spends it, it again consists of some main body and a witness is there to make this whole transaction here evaluate to true. Okay? So in the standard transaction, this condition is simply, as I told you, standard transactions are a special case of strange transactions. This condition is simply verify if, with respect to public key of P2, this transaction T3, the signature W3 is a good signature on the transaction, on the payload of transaction T3. Okay? So you can view verifying algorithm as a, I mean, it's just about generalizing things. Okay, so a verification algorithm for signatures is an algorithm that evaluates to true or false, right? Yes or no, right? Now, and in general, you can view the thing, this is sent to UDA. You can say formally it can be spent by any transaction that has a signature of UDA, right? It's the same thing. Now this whole generalization is about this, okay? So it's about putting here an arbitrary condition, okay? So I'm just specifying what is the condition under which transaction T2 can be spent, okay? And the transaction T2 in this particular case, if it's just a standard transaction, can be spent by any transaction that has a signature of P2, okay? But could be some more complicated condition. Okay? So I can specify more complicated conditions for spending a transaction. Okay? That's the main thing. Are you with me? Yes.
When it's not connected to an identity like our public key, then what stops it? If you reveal the weakness, you're revealing the weakness, right?
Yes.
I mean, the signature is the weakness.
Yes.
What stops anybody else from stealing it?
Yeah, so the thing is that, you see, this here, this C2 usually should look at witness and the payload combined, right? So so you see, in this particular case, it verifies if the T3 and the witness, so if W3 is a good signature on the payload with respect to the public key, which means that it's only like if you are, if this transaction T2 goes to you, it's only you who can produce something like this, okay? So by sending money to you, I mean, I produce a transaction that only you can spend. Okay?
So what sort of thing could you do that didn't have a public key, a signature inside? That's
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
yeah, you can add conditions, for example. Okay, so you can say it's a, and I have it on the.
You might have this and more.
Yes, this is an example of the next that I have on the next slide, and it goes like this: Alice gives 1 Bitcoin to Bob if he factors this number. Okay. Okay, so suppose there is some earlier transaction. It's a standard transaction that can be spent by Alice. Okay. So if I want to spend this transaction, if I'm Alice and I want to spend T1, I just have to produce some transaction that has Alice's signature, right? But then I can put any condition I want here, and the condition is can be spent using Bob's. So this is informal, right? But I will show you in a moment this is a little bit more formal. So informally, this can be spent using Bob's signature and P and Q such that P and Q are larger than 1, and their product is this. Okay? So I'm adding an extra condition. Okay? So formally, I would write something like this. C T and PQ sigma is true if, well, this condition is satisfied, so it's a product, and sigma is Bob's signature on T, so on the main payload. Okay?
And if Bob never factors this number, then actually the money is in limbo. It can never be redeemed.
Yes.
Alice can never spend it anyway.
Yes. Yes, that's why, yes, a very good point. And this is always a problem. And that's why we, for example, use these time locks. Right? Because then time locks will allow us to make it even more complicated, but to make it somehow like this, that Alice is guaranteed that she will get this money back, like after 1 day, for example. Okay? And there are some improvements to Bitcoin which actually allow it to specify explicitly. It's there is one improvement that is actually being implemented now. I'm not sure if it actually is already in the standard or no, but there is one improvement that allows us to say it can be spent by Bob, blah, 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 or after, say, 24 hours, it can be spent back by Alice. Okay? Things like this. And now Bob can claim the money by posting these numbers and the signature on his transaction, and then he can simply put this can be spent using Bob's signature, right? So he knows that later this T3 can be just spent by him as like this can be spent by a standard transaction. Okay? So what I'm saying is that you can add conditions on transactions. Okay? Like, okay, now how are these conditions written? They are written in something called Bitcoin scripting language, which is a non-Turing complete stack-based language that looks a little bit like an assembly language. It is non-Turing complete for a good reason. Anybody has an idea why it's not Turing complete?
So you can't look for
Yeah, exactly. So we want the blockchain to be verified quickly, right? So we don't want to have transactions that takes long time to verify. It should be like immediate to say who is, what is the status, okay? So, and there are these new projects like Ethereum that I'm going to talk about later, which actually allows Turing complete scripts, but they have a system for like making people pay for each step of execution. But in Bitcoin, that's impossible. In Bitcoin, you can only write, the language is very limited, and actually many features of the language are blocked, meaning that they are in the standard, but the miners don't accept them. And so in general, it's kind of hard to post non-standard transactions, but at least in principle, it is possible. And as I told you, there are languages that are supporting this, that are on purpose made like this, that they are used for this kind of contracts. Okay, so okay, so this is an example of something written in this language, and I think it's actually simply This is actually something from a standard, this is a standard transaction because also the standard transactions are written using this Bitcoin scripting language, okay? Because it's just a particular case, okay? And here if you know a little bit of the stack-based thing, so this is, you can see something like duplicate, something called compute hash, then they have some crypto primitives built in, so like computing hash and checking signatures are there, okay? And not much more. And then the string transaction can be used to create so-called Bitcoin contracts. And there are some examples like payment channels. This is something that I'm going to tell you now about. It uses this contracts in a very mild way. So it will be like very simple use of contracts, nothing very complicated. The reason why it cannot be complicated is that the payment channels are actually being implemented on Bitcoin. So they cannot be too complicated. They are using only very basic features of this scripts. But it's a project that's like, I think in deployment now. It's called Lightning. Then you can pay money to anyone who knows some password, for example, like knowing password requires. Then you can have assurance contracts. That's basically what we discussed before. These things like that we pay on if and only if everybody pays. Yes.
I don't really get anybody that knows password. How is it not?
Yeah. Maybe you can pop. Yeah, you can pay either to someone provided that he knows the password, right? Or you can pay to anybody who knows the password. You can also write this, but then there is a risk because like everything is public on Bitcoin. So in particular, everybody who monitors the network can see that this password is being posted, can intercept the transaction and produce his own transaction, right? So you better make it like this, that you pay only to a concrete person. But of course, if you want, you can make it like this. If you want, you can write whatever. Actually, we had a project, we were writing scripts like this, then my students managed to write scripts that were always evaluating to false, no matter what was the input, which means that we lost some money. That, I mean, the coins are still blocked. They're on the blockchain, will be forever. Okay, you can. There are some tools that you can pay deposit that prove you are not a spammer. This uses time logs that you deposit money, and this kind of proves that you are a good guy. It's like a way to fight denial of service. You can pay only if some event happens. This may require an oracle. For example, you have an oracle that testifies that you can have the kind of prediction markets there. Okay, and then there are more advanced examples like this is what where Ethereum is supposed to be useful. You can have decentralized organizations. So the organizations that are purely run on blockchain, and you have all the rules of this organization, of this company or whatever. The rules are written in some kind of scripting language, and you don't need lawyers anymore to decide about what the company does because everything is automatic. Okay? I'm not sure if it will really work. It's not really completely convincing what they say, but it's a big project and many people believe in this decentralized organization. Like companies, instead of using a stock market, they would use Ethereum or something like this. Then you have you can do secure multi-party computation. You can embed secure multi-party computation protocols, like you can use, for example, lotteries or playing cards, where parties are forced to obey the rules and they are forced to pay money if they lost. Right? This is something I'm going to talk about tomorrow. For a moment, I'm going to talk about the payment channels because it's very interesting. It's actually something that I was studying recently. I think it's a very nice topic. So basically the problem is it's hard to make micropayments on Bitcoin, right? So why is it hard to make micropayments in Bitcoin? Because there are non-negligible transaction fees and there are long confirmation times. So for example, doing things like paying for Wi-Fi or paying for downloading something, this is like Bitcoin is not good for this unless you make some very strong trust assumptions that someone will pay you later or something like this, and you trust him, he'll do it, right? So then this is a problem. So Bitcoin is not good for micropayments, and micropayments are payments for like a small fraction of a cent for using a website or something like this. Bitcoin is not good for this. Okay? Also, you have this inherent limitation, so like 7 transactions per second, that's not good. We should have some way of quickly paying with Bitcoin without waiting much and with paying 0 fees or negligible fees. Okay? And Bitcoin is not good for this. And it's unlikely that anything like Bitcoin will actually work for it. So Ethereum has 12 seconds confirmation time. That's actually, even this is probably too long for many micropayments, and it's and the fees are there. So, okay, so if you want to pay like a fraction of a cent, it's very hard to pay. It's very hard to pay a fraction of a cent using any wire transfer, Visa. So basically, this problem is like an open problem in the internet. Okay? So, okay, so this is the idea. The idea is called payment channels, and the most famous proposal is called Lightning Network. And the Lightning Network is so this is what I'm going to talk about. So the idea is Alice and Bob, who wants to make micropayments between each other, they will establish a channel that will allow them to do transactions without posting things on the blockchain. Okay? So this will require some operations on the blockchain, but the operations will be only at the beginning when they establish a channel, and then when they close it. But in the meanwhile, when they do operations, they will not do anything they will not post things on the blockchain. Yeah. So how should it look? Like ideally, we would like to have something like this, that Alice and Bob, they agree that they will establish a channel, and they charge this channel with like 1 Bitcoin each, for example. So I put 1 Bitcoin, Yuda puts 1 Bitcoin, and we'll have a channel which has like 2 Bitcoins inside. And then we can decide how much money goes to each party. Okay? So we can ad hoc decide like who gets how much money out of this channel. Okay? And so this establishment of a channel or founding a channel requires an operation on the blockchain. Okay? But then adjustments of the channel will not require this. So for example, the initial state can be like initially we decided that agreement is that since we both paid 1 Bitcoin there, we also got 1 Bitcoin back out of it. Okay? So it's like nobody loses anything except of the transaction fees on Bitcoin. And this is like kind of like a virtual agreement between us, and it will not be like formalized on the blockchain for the moment. Okay? So when we have this thing that Alice wants to pay 0.01 Bitcoins to Bob, then she can adjust the channel in the following way. So if it was 1 Bitcoin, then let's say suppose that she pays to Bob for like using his website for a minute or something like this. Then they can adjust the channel and say, okay, now it will be 0.99 and 1.01. Okay? So they can change the state of the channel. Okay? Still, like, blockchain is not informed about this. It's just an agreement between them. Okay? And in general, if you have a state of the channel, so by the state of the channel, I mean how much money goes to Alice, how much goes to Bob, then you will have like x and y, so that x plus y is equal to 2, because that's the whole total value of the channel. I'm like forgetting about the transaction fees here. And x goes to Alice and y goes to Bob. And then, for example, if Alice wants to pay some x prime to Bob, then they can agree that now the state of the channel is x minus x prime to Alice, y plus x prime to Bob. Okay? And this all should happen outside of the blockchain. And symmetrically, of course, Bob can pay to Alice. Okay, so it can like go back and forth. And then once they decide it's over, they don't want to do business anymore, they can convert this state of the channel into real money. By real money, I mean Bitcoins. And this can happen basically either if they, for some honest reason, simply they don't want to do business anymore. So for example, that was like Alice was some customer and Bob was a newspaper, and Alice was like reading newspapers on this, reading articles on this news site, and she was paying for every article, and then after some time she doesn't like this newspaper anymore, she closes the channel. Or they can simply enter in some kind of disagreement. For example, like they are angry on each other, Alice paid some micropayment for something and they didn't get it, so they decide, okay, like I want to close the channel. Okay, so then in general, the scenario is like this. So first you have founding the channel, then you have this adjustments. It can take a long time. You can money can go back and forth, and then you have closing the channel, and only this phase is founding and closing the channel will require blockchain operations. Okay, while adjustment can be done offline very efficiently because it just goes like completely outside of the blockchain. Okay, so it's for free basically. I mean, it is for free, right? The only place where you pay is this opening and closing the channel, but these operations are for free, and they only require as much time as some simple public key operations between us. So how to construct a channel? And we start with something called unidirectional channel, where only Alice will pay to Bob. Okay, then we will talk a little bit more about how to invert the direction of the channel. Okay, so the initial state is like this. Alice pays 1 Bitcoin, Bob pays nothing, because it will be just Alice paying to Bob. But initially the state should be like this, that everything goes back to Alice, because she hasn't yet bought anything from Bob, and 0 goes to Bob. Okay, and then they want to start to adjust it, like 0.99 to Alice, 0.01 to Bob, and so on. Okay? Okay, and we use a tool here, and this is this tool from like scripting language, but it's like, as I told you, a very simple tool. It's called multi-signature transactions. So in general, Bitcoin scripts permit to create transactions where you have more than one signature needed to spend it. And actually, it can be like k out of n transactions. And so you can specify n public keys, and in order to spend this transaction, you need k signatures from the set of n public keys to spend it. Okay? So it's like k out of n secret sharing, sort of, right? It's simply there's a threshold. You need this number of signatures to spend it. The reason why they introduced this was similar to what is done in secret sharing. They introduced it pretty early, like they started to use it in the Bitcoin community because they saw this is like a way to increase the security of private keys. So you don't, if you can have like 2 out of 3 signature, multi-signature transaction, and then you know that your transaction is like, I mean, even if someone learns one of your keys, it's safe. Right? And then what we only use here is 2 out of 2 multi-signature transactions. So it's like a transaction like this. So suppose there is some unspent transaction of Carol on the blockchain, and so the signature is like this, the transaction is like this. We say it can be paid by any transaction that has signatures of both Alice and Bob. Okay? And it's signed by Carol because it's redeeming a transaction, unspent transaction of Carol. Okay? So this can be redeemed by a signature that can be spent by Dave, and it's a signature of Alice, signature of Bob. Okay, and there is a convention. Instead of writing something like this, which is like a long text, we can just say Carol sends 1 Bitcoin from T1 to Alice and Bob. Okay? But Alice and Bob will mean that it needs to be both signatures of Alice and Bob. Okay? It's clear? Like 2 out of 2. Okay, so how to found the channel? Alice creates a founding transaction T0 as follows. So she has some unspent transaction T somewhere, right? And she says, okay, I'm sending 1 Bitcoin from transaction T to Alice and Bob, signature of Alice. Okay? And now, can she post this transaction on the blockchain? It's sort of risky, right? This is like what Yuda was asking before. That if she posts T0 on the blockchain, then her money can be locked forever, right? Because if Bob doesn't cooperate, then there is no way for Alice to force Bob to sign anything. So she just locked 1 Bitcoin somewhere, and it's not going to go back to her, right? This is the problem. Okay? So this idea, this is the first step that we have, but we need something more. Okay? So what do we do? This is where we use time locks. It's an example of how time locks are used. So before posting T0, before posting T0, Alice creates a transaction that is claiming T0, and it says it goes back to Alice. Okay, so it's a transaction that goes back to her, and can be posted in 30 days on the blockchain. Okay? So there's a time lock 30 days. Okay? And she asks Bob to sign it for her before she actually posts T0. Okay? Now there's a little Okay, and then Bob signs it. Okay, there's a little problem here that we don't want to send this transaction T0 to Bob, right? Because then he could post it on the blockchain, but fortunately this can be done because it's anyway like we sign hashes, right? So this can be done. And the bad news is that there is a malleability problem here because this transaction T0 is identified by its hash, right? Now, so it looks like this. Alice thinks she's safe because Alice has a signature. So Alice thinks she's safe and she can post T0 because she knows she has a signature of Bob on this transaction, right? Then she can sign it herself also because it requires 2 signatures and she can take the money back. But the problem is that if someone later modifies T0, this transaction doesn't work anymore because this is a different T0 somehow. Okay? Hash is different, so there's a malleability problem. Okay, this is a technical thing and we are going to forget about it because there are some tools to deal with this. Okay? So we forget about the malleability problem. We assume that this doesn't happen. Yes?
You're asking Bob to sign on this without knowing what's written in T0. Maybe T0 says something like, give all of my bitcoins to Alice.
Yeah, so the thing is that's why you should use fresh keys, of course, like keys that you don't use anywhere else than for this particular channel, right? And also, you see, the thing is you shouldn't show T0 to him, right? So T0 is, actually here probably I should write T0, not T prime. So T0 is this founding transaction, and this T prime that he's signing is just contains like here will be in fact like a hash of T0, okay? So he can kind of see what is here, right? He can see that it is a transaction that spends some transaction T0 and sends it back to Alice, and he knows that he is not using this public keys to anything else than this protocol. Okay, so yeah, he should be a little bit careful that there is no conflict with some other transactions in the protocol, but this can be done. Okay, so yeah, but yeah, he should avoid using the same public key here and outside. Okay, so to get some sort of universal composability or whatever. Okay, so what is the situation? Now Alice can be sure that in 30 days she can get her money back by adding her own signature to T prime, right? Because she got this from Bob, right? In 30 days, she can add her own signature and get the money, and then post T prime on the blockchain. Assuming that this malleability problem is fixed, she can get the money back. Okay, so she can safely post T0 because she knows that in the worst case, in 30 days, she gets her money back. How much time do I have, by the way?
20.
Okay. Okay, so this is the first blockchain transaction. Alice sends T0 on the blockchain. Okay? So this is this founding transaction. It can be spent only by signature of Alice and Bob, but Alice has a signature that it has a signed transaction by Bob that allows her to go get this money back in the 30 days. In 30 days. So she is. Okay, the worst thing that can happen to her is that she will have her money blocked. Okay? Okay, so now how to make a micropayment? So. In order to send 0.01 Bitcoin to Bob, Alice sends to Bob a transaction T1 constructed as follows. So the transaction goes like this. Alice sends 0.99 from transaction T0 back to herself, right? Because the state until now was 1, 0, right? 1 back to Alice, 0 to Bob. Now she makes a transaction like this that says, okay, this can be spent by, this is a transaction that has a value 0.99. So this transaction T1 sends 0.99 from T0 to Alice, back to Alice, and 0.01 to Bob, if 29 days have passed. Okay? The reason why I have the 29 days, this will become clear in a moment. For a moment, forget about it. And she puts her signature on it. Okay? So how can Bob get real money from T1? Why can Bob be now sure that he gets this? No matter how Alice cheats, Bob will get this money. Because the only thing that is missing here is the signature of Bob, right? And that's something he can produce himself, right? So he has this partially signed transaction, and he knows if I really want, I can add my signature and post it on the blockchain, okay, in 29 days. But, yes?
But the transaction may change in the future.
Sorry?
The transaction may change.
Yes. So yes. So then we will.
How can Alice sign on it in advance?
Yes. So the thing. Yeah, you are right. That the transaction. This is what we'll have on the next slide. That we will be adjusting this channel. Okay. So these transactions will be changing. Okay. That's why we have to be a little bit careful about who signs what. Okay. So now we sign. But now there is no problem for a moment. So there's a signature of Alice, and Alice cannot post it on the blockchain because she doesn't have the signature of Bob, but Bob can do it. Okay, so Bob can get this 0.01, okay, and Alice will get back her change. Okay? He can then add his own signature and post it on the blockchain in 29 days.
You have to say that the time lock read is not double spending.
So time lock is like this. Time lock is needed because at some point we will start to reverse this channel. But for we want to invert this channel so that money can go back from
No,
Bob.
I mean the previous.
The
time
previous.
lock, as opposed to
This one.
What you're saying is if you have a time lock like this,
Yes.
money can be spent by someone else
Yes.
before that happens.
Yes. Exactly. So because otherwise, so this is like a very good transaction to Alice, right? This is for Alice. This is a transaction that gives her back all the money. Okay. So she would actually, if she's malicious, she would like to post it immediately, right? But that's why we block it. So for 30 days, Bob is rather safe. And the reason why we're talking about days here, not hours, is that Bitcoin is so slow, right? So we want to have some safety margin. But if we go implement over other currencies, maybe it can go faster. Okay, and yeah, this is the important thing, that Bob has to post this thing before day 30. Actually, in day 29, because this is when he can do it, okay? Because as otherwise, Alice can steal all the money. That's what you does it. That the money has to be, this one has to be used by day 29, the latest. Or the earliest also, because there is a time. And so on, right? So we can now adjust this channel further and have like 98 Bitcoins from T0 to Alice, 0.02 Bitcoins from T0 to Bob, if 29 days pass, and then signature of Alice, and then if Bob adds his signature, then he can spend it. Okay? So it can go like this. And in general, to send Y Bitcoins from Alice to Bob, if we have last transaction was X to Alice 1 minus X to Bob, then we can adjust it by making X minus Y to Alice, 1 minus X minus Y to Bob. Right? This is like a simple generalization. We can choose send an arbitrary amount of money as long as there is money in the channel for this. Okay, so how to close the channel? Bob can simply at day 29 add his signature and post the latest TI. Okay? Why would he post the last TI, not some earlier TI? Because the later the better for you, right? Because it's just, sorry? He gets more money, right? So we don't care about what happens to people who don't protect their own interest, right? So in his own interest is to spend the last one, the last TI. Okay? So he will do it. We can assume he will do it. To close the channel, Alice, if Alice wants to ask to close the channel, she has to wait. Or maybe if she wants to do it earlier in day 29, she can also ask Bob if they are both nice to each other, they can close the channel early. Okay, now suppose Bob wants to send money back to Alice. And the question is how to invert the channel. And let us look how it looks. So I'm going to just give you like an overview without going too much into details. So this is like the situation that we had, right? So this is Bob's payout, how much Bob gets from the channel. over time, right? Initially he was getting nothing, and then it's growing, right? So it just from the point of view of Bob, it just gets more and more money, right? Now we would like to have a situation where it can actually go up and down, right? We want to have a situation where he can pay back some of this money to Alice. Okay? How to do it? So these are periods, this here, where it's Alice who is gaining money with time, right? So what is the problem with the previous solution? Well, the problem is that we cannot use this argument anymore that with time it's only better and better for Bob, right? Yeah, because here with time it's only better and better with Alice, right? So for example, Bob, in this place here, Bob would be actually better off if they publish this transaction from this moment, right? So let's concentrate on a single inversion, because it generalizes. And suppose the state of the channel is 1 minus y to Alice, y to Bob. Okay? So this is what's depicted here, 1 y to Bob, and the rest goes to Alice. Okay? So now we'll invert the situation, and we will send these y bitcoins back to Bob. So simply, everything gets inverted, and now if the state was, here was 1 minus y and y, then we get 1 minus y prime, and here y minus 1 prime, right? We just adjust the channel, and it's Bob who signs it and sends it to Alice. Okay? So we do exactly symmetric thing. Now it's signature of Bob sent to Alice. Okay? And now we have to put this 28 days here. Why? So that's the thing. So it's now Bob who is losing money, right? So on day 29, so remember we had first this time log 29, right? So on day 29, which is somewhere here, he can post the transaction from here, which is better for him than all the transactions from here. So we don't want him to do it. So that's why you said this time log 29. Okay? So he can post this transaction here, but he has to wait until until day 29. Okay? And here, when we invert it, we decrease this time bound to 28. So there is this window of 1 day where when Alice can post her last transaction from this. Okay? So every inversion costs us 1 day in this time limit. Okay? We have to decrease the time limit because the interests are inverting, so we have to give to the other party a chance to post a transaction that's best for her, sort of, informally speaking. So that there is time to react. Okay, and then one more problem is, and this is where really like some more advanced features, still quite simple, of scripts come. So the problem is that this solution requires every pair of parties to have a separate channel, right? So if I want to do transactions with everyone here, I should establish a channel with everyone here, and this is like complicated because establishing channel takes time and money. So can we do better? So can we save money even further? And it turns out yes, and the idea is very nice, and this is actually why it's called networks, payment networks. Because what we can do is we can make like a graph which is not complete. So I'm connected only to some people, okay? But these people will route payments for me. Okay? So for example, you have a situation where Alice has a channel to Bob, Bob has a channel to Carol, Carol has a channel to Dave, and then Alice can make a payment to Dave. Okay? Via Bob and Carol. So they don't need to have a channel open. Okay? And ideally, I think, in practice, how they imagine this in this Lightning Network community is that Bob and Carol will be kind of like businesses, the payment services, sort of like banks. That when I want to make micropayments, I will open like a few channels with some kind of like banks or payment services, and they will have all channels between themselves. So if I want to make payment to anybody else in the internet who has a channel open with one of the services, like we can route these payments. Yeah? And yeah, they can actually charge little fees for this, right? So well, the operation cost should not be high, so this fees can be very small, but still they should be there to kind of encourage people to do this routing. Okay? But fees can be like counted in like percentage of a small percentage of a micropayment, not like a constant value that's added to every transaction. Okay, so how to do it, and I'm not going to go into details here, but I'm just going to tell you what is used here. So we use this thing called hash lock transaction, or they use this thing called hash lock transaction. So we have a hash function, and we have y equal to, let y be equal to hash of x, and y hash lock transaction from A to B can be redeemed only by publishing x. So basically, you remember this example which I had with this factorization, okay? So this is almost the same. This can be spent using B's signature, such, and using x such that y equals to h of x, okay? So I can compute, I can choose randomly x, and give y to someone, and then someone can make a transaction that can be spent by me only if I provide x. Okay? And the way they do it is, later they use it is, so first Dave generates this x randomly and chooses y equals to h of x, passes y to Alice. Okay? Okay, because maybe I should have said it. So the thing what we want to do now is we want to make this routing of payments without any trust assumptions. Okay, so we don't want to have like Alice needs to trust Bob or Carol or someone like this, especially because it will be longer path, right? So the way it's done is Alice makes a transaction. Here I'm kind of informal. Alice makes a transaction saying, okay, I pay 0.01. I pay you 0.01 if you show me x such that y is equal to h of x. And so on. Everybody makes the same kind of promise to, on this channel. So you make like a channel adjustment with this particular clause that is adjusted only if you provide the witness. Okay? And then the thing is like, in order to claim this money here, Dave has to publish x, has to send x to Carol, and then Carol longs x so can claim money from Bob, and Bob can claim money from Alice. Okay? So you use this kind of hash lock feature to guarantee that only a person who knows a given password, given X, can claim the money. Okay, so at the end, Carol, for example, will not lose her money unless she learns X. But if she learns X, then she is sure that she can get money from Bob. And similar with Bob and similar with Alice. Okay, so I'm skipping many things here, but this is basically the idea. Okay, so use this hash lock thing to guarantee that nobody can cheat anyone. Of course, you need to have several time locks here that you are sure that money doesn't get locked. But basically, like for example, if Dave doesn't provide this X on time, then what Carol can do can enter some procedure of closing the channel. I don't want to do anything anymore with Dave because he is not providing me X. Okay, so there are many improvements to this. So, and unfortunately, the Lightning Network, how it's presented now, it requires several changes in Bitcoin specification. So you can, but what they can achieve, assuming several things in Bitcoin are changed, is they can have channels that are open forever. So you don't have to specify this 30 days thing. You can have a channel that is open until the end of the universe, and then. If one party decides that she wants to close the channel, then she can do it. Okay? So, but there is no specific deadline when it has to be done. So in particular, you can have channels that are open for like years, and they don't enter the blockchain. Okay? Which is like super cool because what you can have is like at the end that you will have like all these payments happening in the internet. But you will not see them on the blockchain. But they will all be like between people, and use sort of like blockchain only as like ultimate arbiter for resolving disputes, basically, or for like closing channels if you like totally want to get out of business and you want to convert your channel to bitcoins and then Bitcoin to dollars. Okay, so that was it I think for today. I think we are okay with time, right? Because I have a new topic to start, but I think Yuda? We should finish now. Okay. So I'm going to. So tomorrow it will be a little bit more research oriented. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about more advanced things, like these things that I was doing with my students, multiparty computations, and but I'm kind of in a very mild way. So there will be no like complicated things. They're like basically lotteries only, and then also this proof of space that I was doing with other people. And space mint. That's a new currency. So just to we basically talk about other ideas for cryptocurrencies, like including academic ideas.